The federal government was recently handed the Productivity Commission's report into gambling. The draft report recommended that limits be placed on how much people can gamble on poker machines at any one time. But registered clubs argue that reforms of this kind would jeopardise $1.2 billion worth of what the clubs claim is social work. Some are questioning whether the club industry is in fact exaggerating the contributions it makes to the community. Steve Kinane reports.
This man is a member of 14 different licensed clubs in Sydney.
Here's my Revesby Workers Club, Parramatta Leagues.
Paul Bendett's multiple memberships are unusual.
East, Dooley's, Club Marconi, Canterbury.
For starters, he doesn't even live in Sydney, and he's not a fan of any of the clubs. Paul Bendett is an anti-Pokies campaigner. He signed up to 14 clubs so he could get his hands on their annual reports.
I found that the donations weren't quite as magnanimous as first represented. As a general rule of thumb, they seem to spend 3 to 4 to 5 times more on marketing than they actually do on donations back to the community.
Clubs have long boasted of the community benefits of poker machines.
Poker machines help support 117 junior football teams sponsored by the club.
For years, clubs have enjoyed large tax concessions because of contributions they make to the community. Clubs in New South Wales rake in $3.3 billion a year from the Pokies, with the Productivity Commission estimating that 40% of those takings come from problem gamblers. Questions are being asked about how much these clubs are giving and how much they're taking.
Clubs give to the community, and we know that because we see what clubs do out in the suburbs and the townships around New South Wales and Australia. We also know it because IPART, a New South Wales independent authority, has measured it very recently at $811 million a year.
That figure was calculated by IPART, the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal. It was based on data provided by the clubs in 2007. The $811 million includes $676 million worth of goods and services provided to club patrons, such as discounted food and drink, sporting facilities and room hire. $44 million is calculated as the value of volunteer hours provided by club members and staff. And $91 million of the total was directly donated to charities and sporting groups in 2007. Clubs Australia have used the IPART report to argue they provide $1.2 billion worth of social work across the country each year. But the CEO of IPART disputes this claim. Around 90% of that figure would be hard-pressed to qualify as social work.
I think some, for example, contributions to charity clearly does fall within the realm of social work. Some, for example, providing benefits to members who play golf cheaper than otherwise would have done. I mean, I think that is a contribution to society, so it's a social benefit, but I think perhaps social work is stretching it a bit far.
Do you think it's fair to classify discounted schooners and cheap golf and bowls games as social work?
One of the great strengths of clubs is the ability to provide affordable food and beverage and facilities out there in the suburbs and towns. If you lived in Dubbo, if you lived in Lightning Ridge, you can only go to the club. They don't have the options of the people of inner Sydney, so it absolutely is.
Betty Conn-Walker, a former senior New South Wales Treasury official who has studied the club movement, disagrees and argues the $91 million the clubs say they give to charity also needs closer scrutiny.
Now, you need to break that figure by the fact that around $40 million of that comes back to them as a tax reduction. In addition, a lot of the community contributions are what's called in kind. In other words, the hire of rooms for meetings and that kind of thing. So once you take all that into account, you're left with, at best, around $30 million of cash contributions to the community at large.
But charities such as Youth Off the Streets say these kind of donations make a big difference to what they do.
We wouldn't have been in Arche. We wouldn't have set up one of the most successful programs in Arche if it hadn't been for clubs who instantly came and gave us, a couple $100,000 to kick us off.
But Betty Conn-Walker remains unconvinced, claiming the big clubs get more in tax concessions than they give back to charity.
When you look at the government's own budget papers, in the current financial year, they have costed the tax concession to the club industry at just under $600 million for this year alone, and it's growing. What they are saying is that if clubs were paying the same tax rates as hotels, the government would have an additional $600 million in its coffers to spend on health, education and so on.
IPART also said that the New South Wales government support that is currently provided is absolutely justified. You call it a tax concession, I say that that's recognition that clubs are not-for-profit organisations that send all of their money back to their members and the local community in one way or another.
Paul Bendat thinks the clubs are exaggerating what they do for the community.
What the vast amount of this social contribution is the discounts that they give on snooker tables, schooners of beer, function rooms. It's not real money that goes back into the community.
The Rudd government is expected to release the Productivity Commission's final report into gambling in June. Steve Kinane, Lateline.